Hi there, my name is Michael Fackrell, and today we're going to do a Bible study on a very interesting theme. The thing I want to talk about today is known as the Tabernacle of David. Now, why should we be interested in the Tabernacle of David? Well, I can assure you I wouldn't be spending any time on it if I didn't think it was important. And it's something that's mentioned both in the Old and New Testaments, and it's not obvious at first what it means. We should establish first of all what the Tabernacle of David was. Tabernacle means tent. So the Tabernacle of David was actually a tent that David, the king of Israel, set up. And in this tent he actually brought the Ark of the Covenant, which was a symbol of the manifest presence of God. And God actually dwelt somehow in that ark in a special way. It was a holy thing. It was normally reserved for the Holy of Holies in the Tabernacle of Moses, the tent of Moses. But David brought it into his own tent, and it's interesting to see the history of this and then what the prophets say about it and what James, the brother of the Lord, said about it in the New Testament, because there are actually some secrets in here which they have relevance to our church life today. So I want us to look at 2 Samuel chapter 6 and beginning with verse 12. And I encourage you to read the whole of the chapter, but for the sake of time, we'll just start at verse 12. Now it was told King David, saying, "The Lord has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him, because of the ark of God." So David went and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with gladness. And so it was, when those bearing the ark of the Lord had gone 6 paces, that he sacrificed oxen and fatted sheep. Then David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was wearing a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the trumpet. Now as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, Michal, Saul's daughter, looked through a window and saw King David leaping and whirling before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. So they brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place in the midst of the tabernacle that David had erected for it. Then David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And when David had finished offering burnt offerings and peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. Then he distributed among all the people, among the whole multitude of Israel, both women and men, to everyone a loaf of bread, a piece of meat, and a cake of raisins. So all the people departed, everyone to his house. Then David returned to bless his household, and Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, "How glorious was the king of Israel today, uncovering himself today in the eyes of the maids of his servants, as one of the base fellows shamelessly uncovers himself." So David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord who chose me instead of your father and all his house to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord, over Israel. Therefore I will play music before the Lord, and I will be even more undignified than this, and will be humble in my own sight. But as for the maidservants of whom you have spoken, by them I will be held in honor." Therefore Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. Now we see in this passage that David was bringing the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem. He tried before once, and even though he did it with the best of intentions, he did it in a way that was contrary to the law of Moses, and as a result, when the ox cart stumbled, it looked like the Ark of the Covenant was going to fall off. Rather than that happening, one of the people that was there, named Uzzah, reached out to stabilize the ark and the cart to prevent it from falling down. But the Lord considered this an act of irreverence, touching this ark. And what happened as a result was he was instantly struck dead, this man Uzzah. And so David was kind of afraid and angry, displeased by this, and left the ark in the house of a man called Obed-Edom. It was told to King David after some time that the Lord had blessed Obed-Edom in everything. And so this man had become very prosperous, and I think that's a symbol of what can happen when the presence of God is in your house. When the presence of God is in your life and in your house, God's blessing comes and everything starts to go well and prosperity comes. That's something that God can definitely do, and we should not forget it. I'm not saying that Christians will never have hard times or that there will always be abundance, but there's a definite blessing that comes with the presence of God. And David wanted that blessing. He had heard about how God was blessing Obed-Edom. He said, it's about time I got this ark back to Jerusalem. He wanted the blessing himself. And he wanted to honor the Lord and wanted to get the ark back. It's just interesting what he did though, because if you look at the law of Moses, that ark was supposed to be in the Tabernacle of Moses, in the Holy of Holies, where only the high priest could come once a year with special offerings and have access to that presence. Yet David was doing something different. David was rejoicing before the Lord. I didn't read anything much in the books of Moses about rejoicing in the presence of God. It was more somber and sober in the Mosaic way of doing things. God was more seen as a God to be feared, and he is a God to be feared, and a God to be reverenced, and a God that was so holy and unapproachable you couldn't get near him. But I don't think that this was God's heart, to be forever cut off from his people and only accessible by the high priest. And it's very interesting how David behaved here. It says that he brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with gladness. So David was one who served the Lord with gladness. It says in Psalm 100, serve the Lord with gladness, come before his presence with thanksgiving. So our worship of God is not to be a dour and gloomy and sad affair. For King David, it was an occasion of joy to bring the presence of God, to bring the ark of God back to the city of David, to Jerusalem. And so it should be for us as Christians. We should be rejoicing in the presence of the Lord. The Bible says to rejoice always. And so David danced, and some people don't like dancing, but David danced before the Lord, and the Lord liked it. It was a full-on, wholehearted display of love for God. And sometimes people get very enthusiastic about soccer games, football games, and other things. And the same people, when they go to church, look very sad and unenthusiastic, looking at their watch, hoping the whole thing will be over pretty quickly, maybe so they can go and watch the football. It shows that people find sports and stuff like that exciting and worth getting excited about, but the creator of the universe, how boring. Well, David didn't see it that way, because he knew who God was, and he had said in another place, one thing I've desired of the Lord, and that will I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his presence. And David knew that the presence of God and the knowledge of God was worth more than all the other things he could have as a man. And he had enjoyed life to the full. I mean, he had wives, he had riches, he had military success and adventure, many things he enjoyed. He was a poet, he was a writer, but he said that the presence of God for him surpassed everything that he could know in this world. And for David, the presence of God as represented by the Ark of the Covenant was a big deal. And so it should be for us as Christians. Now, we see that he comes and he offers sacrifices and all the things to show his respect to God, acknowledge his need for forgiveness and the forgiveness of the people, but he wants God's blessing. He also distributes some food to all the people, which I think is a great thing. I mean, we should be definitely caring for the needs of others and celebrating together. The early church, they ate together and they celebrated with proper meals, not little crackers and bits of fruit juice. They actually had love feasts, and they had open hearts and open homes towards one another.